yamsketch.
So last time we were getting into coloring comics. We had already done flatting, we've already done inking and all that stuff. And I showed you a method which is what I call the selection method, where I use the lasso to make selections and then of where I want light or shadow to be. So maybe I want that to be in shadow. And then what I do is I take the wand, I switch it to intersect mode, and I go back to my flats channel and I click on the thing that I want to put that shadow or that highlight on. And what it does is it takes my loose selection and it locks it into the that particular color area. So that's a pretty cool method. And that method will get you about this far, like we have at the top here, okay? So it'll get you something that looks pretty decent, that does have like a much more finished feel to it, and something that could certainly be a comic, okay? Now, what I wanna talk about in this one is how do we take a different approach? So here's our highlights and our shadows. We're gonna strip that back to our flat colors, and we're going to attack it from here, okay? So this is another way to do things, all right? So there are multiple ways to color. That was one that's pretty nice, pretty fast, non-destructive, a lot of good things to say for that, but it's pretty simple. You know, it's like kind of doing two-tone, although you could add more layers to this. You could make it more complicated than this. It is pretty simple, okay? So the next one that I want to talk about is a more painterly style. And the way that that works is we'll go to our color layer here, okay? And just because this is a new thing, I'm going to duplicate this. Usually I only have one layer here, but I'm just keeping this because we're making some other tutorials. So we're going to call this color painterly, okay? And I'm going to turn this one off. Just turn that one off because we're not going to work with this one right now. But we are going to work with this one. So here's our painterly color. So we had our original flats, then we had the base colors. Now we're going to do something interesting. We're going to use this color painterly, and we're only going to use this one layer. We're not going to add additional layers. We're not going to cheat it. We're going to just straight up paint. So I'm going to get my brush tool, and then you want to get your favorite paintbrush, whatever it's going to be for this series. So I have Kyle's brushes here, which are great. Kyle T. Webster's brushes. You can get those if you want. They do cost money. I also like to make my own brushes though, so you can check out the custom brushes series for that. But just for this one, I do like his brushes, so I am going to grab something from him. So let's get something like what's good, like a pastel. That might be fun. Check this out. Let's grab a pastel and see how that looks. So that's kind of cool, right? That's a neat one. I think that would look kind of cool. Let's see what else he's got. Let's pick something. Let's pick something fun. Pastel is good. Birch brush. Let's see what we got for that. That's cool. All right, we're using this. Done. Birch brush. So now there's a lot of different brush styles I could use, but this one is very obviously like a brush, so this is what I'm going to use. So what I want to do here is I want to start to think about this in terms of like if I was doing an illustration or a painting. So this style takes a little bit longer, but I do have some tricks that make it a little bit faster. So here is my base color. So that's going to be kind of my base coat in the medium color. Now I have shadows that need to come into this, and I have highlights and so on. So first thing I'm going to do is paint the shadows. So if I click on that, then I pull it down. A shadow is probably going to be less saturated and also darker. So you usually come in a diagonal. So if I hit that, I pull it in a diagonal. Now if I want it to be high contrast, I pull it more. If I want it to be a lower contrast, I pull it less. It's the golden hour, so I don't know, we'll go to here. And then here's the other thing about a shadow. That gives me my saturation and my value, but also the hue shifts. So this is yellow golden sun, so that's the sun color up here. I would probably shift down towards blue, right? So it's easy with this bar here. All you have to do is move in the direction that makes sense. So yellow is the sun color, so I gotta go the opposite way, so I'll go down here. And then just trust that this is right. This means I'm adding blue because eventually it'll wrap around and come back here, right? So let's just add some blue to it. So hit that, move it less saturated, darker, and a little bit towards blue. Now you get what should be a good shadow color, okay? And if it's not quite high contrast enough or whatever, just come back in here and modify it. So let's make it a little bit darker so we can see it. In fact, even a little bit bluer and a little bit darker. I'm saying bluer because even though we're moving into red, I'm wrapping towards blue. The rainbow goes all the way around and then wraps again. So I am moving towards blue. That means I'm adding blue to it, okay? So now, if I just paint on here, obviously you'll see a problem, which is that if I get into these areas, I'm gonna have to be really careful and like, oh no, this is gonna suck because now I have to be really careful with my painting and I'm using a big brush. So to avoid that, we're gonna go back to our handy dandy flats. That's what these flats are for. So grab the wand, take it off of intersect, make sure it's on just normal mode. Grab the thing that you wanna paint on. So in this case, it's gonna be the fur color. And then go back to your painterly layer, get your brush, and start going to town. Now this, frankly, is one of my favorite ways to work because it's super simple. Now I am screwing up the color layer here, which means that if I am working on this guy and then I move away from this, I go work on something else, or I just want to come back to this, and I come in here and I grab this, oh no, now I can't work on it again, right? Well, wrong, because we've saved our flats layer. So remember, the flats layer is something that you always leave for yourself as a resource. And the reason you do it is so you can screw up this layer as much as you want. So even though we're no longer worrying about aliasing and stuff like that on the paint layer, we're just going to town, we're getting messy with it. On the flats layer, we've locked that so that it is always a perfect flat, no aliasing, anti-aliasing, none of that nonsense of any kind, so that it's always a reference for us to come back here and make our perfect selections. Now you're probably saying, oh, flats are cool. And you should be, because they are. So now we come back here and boom, we can just come in here and paint. So the thing about this is the shadows, the highlights, and everything in between. Now the style is just up to you and your ability as a painter. And you can do anything. You can mix colors, you can use any brushes that you want and custom brushes. You can do literally anything. You could airbrush, you could use a brush kind of like I'm using with a lot of texture, and you can play too. You can just say like, oh, I'm gonna knock that back. No, I don't like that. I'm gonna bring some of that back. I'm gonna knock that much back, right? So it's really fun for me personally. I really like this style of coloring because it gives me a ton of control and it gives me the ability to play and experiment. And not worry too much, because if I mess it up real bad, I can just go back to my flats, make a selection, and just paint bucket it, just dump it, flood fill it, start over. So I do like to work quickly though, because I don't want to start over too many times, so I want to be efficient. But the other cool thing about this is because we're working on one layer, I'm working with multiple selections, but there's only one layer. We're working with the color painterly layer, right? Because of that, I can put my highlights and my shadows and any multiple colors and all that stuff in the same place. So it's easy to modify and tweak. And again, I'm just doing a quick paint here, but if you want to use your smear tools and, you know, like paint in rough colors and then blend them and smear them around, just anything you would do when you're painting, you can do here, which is just really fun. So I'm just going to kind of rough it in like this. And then if I see like, you know, there should be light in the top, so why did I put shadows there? I can just come back in and fix that. I can actually, you know, grab sample colors from around, and then that looks like a pretty decent sunlight color. So I can, there we go. I can start to think about how I want the light to play into this, and maybe I'll there highlight that, or maybe this should all be backlit, right? There we go. Maybe there should be a little bit of light hitting off of here, bridge of the nose in this area, cheek, maybe in there even, a little bit in there. Okay, and I can just play with this, and this allows you to really stylize your color work as well, because obviously the brushes that you use and all those things are completely going to affect how it looks. Now, the danger with this is that you can spend forever painting these. You can spend way too much time, because, you know, a painting takes a lot more time than just like making a few selections. So you do have to be careful to just be, you know, be honest with yourself about how much time you're spending on something, and try not to go overboard. The cool thing too, though, about doing a painterly thing is I can put in, you know, little swatches of other colors and stuff like that, which I think is a lot of fun. And I don't have to limit myself to just doing like, okay, shadow color, highlight color, done. The other thing that I really like to do, it's coming fast and furious right now. So again, if you have any questions about anything, put them. So I can go to my brush editor. And one of the things I really like to do is I like to go to color dynamics, turn that on. And then I can either do a foreground background jitter, or I can just mess with this. So I'll go hue jitter, saturation, brightness, tons of that. Now look what happens. I get, I don't know if I'm going to turn this up just so, this is probably good for me, but I'm going to turn it up just so you can see it even more. But do you see? This is that one shadow color, and now we're getting a ton of variety out of it. So depending on the style that you're going for, you know, you could actually just leave that on always, and now you just get a lot of color, and it looks like, you know, you're doing more of a impressionist painting, and it looks like you were spending a lot of time making color choices and dabbing different paint colors on here. But the reality is that you just checked the color dynamics box and went to town like normal. And then what's cool about this is if I just grab the base color even, but then draw on that, you can see that while the average of the base color is the same, you get tons of variety and a lot more character to the paint. So even if I just painted him as a blank figure, in fact, let's do that. See, even if I just painted him flat, well, now he's like, this is a completely different effect. And that's what I mean sort of by painterly. So this is a very painterly effect that we got, which is cool in and of itself, right? So you can do those kinds of effects when you create a new layer, but you rely on the flats for selections. And then the best part about this is if I lose my selection, I work on some other area of his body, like let's just work on the antlers for now, come back to the paint layer. Again, I'll just grab the base color, but I have that painterly effect on with color dynamics, so that already looks cool. Okay, so for shadow, less saturated, darker, and moving towards blue in this case, because the sunlight is yellow. Okay, so that I can hit here. I think I'll go darker too. So there, so shadows, boom, hit some shadows in there, shadows in here. So I can work on this really quickly, and then, now traditionally, you know, this is all on one layer, so if I wanted to go back and paint the body again, I'd be, you know, kicking myself because I'd be thinking, oh man, now I'm going to have to really carefully try to paint around and dodge my strokes and all this stuff. But I don't have to do that because we're smart enough to have flats. So you just go to the flats channel, click on where you want to click on, go back to your paint layer, and boom, you're back to painting, you're happy, you're laughing. Okay, so that is a really cool way to approach this. In my mind, that's one of my favorite ways because you just get such good effects. I really like the way that his antlers are looking, so I think I'm going to darken the body for contrast. Now here's a cool thing also. So I make that flat selection as a selection, right? I make sure nothing else is selected anywhere else, so get out of here, you. I want my deer. I don't want a bush. Get out of there. All right, so now I go back to my color layer and boom, bring up your levels or any other curves or anything else you prefer. And now you can tweak with stuff. You can play with stuff. In this case, I'm going to make him a little bit darker. I'm also thinking I'm going to make him a little bit bluer. So that's yellower. Bluer. There we go. Kind of like that. Yeah. All right. So I kind of dig that. All right. And then let's see what we want to do with the red. So you can really tweak this stuff. That's cool. I like that. Okay. So you can really tweak this stuff and play with it and edit it really quickly just because of these selections. So you do not need an extra layer. All you need is a good selection on these flats, okay? Now, I want to point out something really cool, and that is these two methods that we've gone over, one which is the lasso selection method and creating two layers, one for shadows, one for highlights. Shadows is on multiply, highlights is on screen mode or overlay or something. That, and then this, where I'm painting directly on this guy, they are not mutually exclusive. So I can paint and create a painterly base, and then add shadows and highlights, okay? So I just want to make you guys aware of the fact that you can layer these approaches, and now you can kind of start to get something which is pretty cool, pretty unique, Looks like it took some time to do, but really, how long did that take? Not that long, right? So those are two approaches for you that I really like. One of them would just be adding shadows and highlights, okay? Then the next one would be just doing a painterly approach instead of the shadows and highlights. And then the last one might be the idea of combining the two, right? Then you could do that. And if you wanted to, so why not, do the same thing with the background? So this background we can grab here. Let's just grab this. Those are the trees, right? And then we can come in here with our brush and we can get a painterly effect on it. So I can even leave the shadows and the highlights layer on to see exactly what that effect's going to give me, or I can turn those on and off and just work on this so I can get sort of how I want it to feel first and then do the shadows and highlights. But anyway, the point is that you have a lot of options here if you use one or the other or both of those methods at the same time. There's a ton of cool things you can do, and just by the types of selections that you make and then also by the types of brushes that you use, you can really create all sorts of effects. You can create acrylic, wash, watercolor, like sumie paintings, or you can just make stuff look totally wild and different and unique. I really think this is a cool approach. I hope you guys like this. Let me know if you use this on anything, or if you're, of course, if you have questions or anything like that, put them in the comments. But if you use this stuff, let me know too, because that would be rad. I would love to see that. That would be a ton of fun. Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at this, all this painterly stuff I've done. So let's maybe grab the selection down here and then go to our painterly layer, and I'm gonna grab that and make this painterly. And it's pretty easy to make painterly, right? Because I've already got shadows and highlights. I can kind of just run over this. So again, those color dynamics are really fun. I love to use those if you want more of a sort of impressionist kind of look. I really recommend trying that out. They work really well. And then the cool thing too is, ooh, yellow. That's cool actually, but let's try here at first. So is if you paint with kind of directionality, so if I paint in the direction that these mountains are going, you can see that it starts to look pretty cool. If I paint the other way, I get a totally different effect, and that's cool too. So just think about that. Like if you're painting with a brush, you get to create all these different effects just based on how you're stroking the brush on the canvas. So anyway, those are some of my tricks. In the next one, I am actually going to show you yet another one. And this one is pretty wild. This is a trick that some people know about, but it is honestly really, really cool. And one of the things I like to do is I like to use it in tandem with some of my other tricks, kind of like I showed you here. Like there's no reason that you have to do just painting or the shadows highlights. Here's just like a nice painterly look. And then why not just add both on top of that? Because how rad is that? I think that's really cool. I think that looks pretty decent and has like a pretty interesting look to it. And then if you want to, you can come back to your color painterly and even, go and make your selection here. And then you can come in here and, start to add more details to these things, more shadows, more highlights in the painterly realm of it. You can add more depth and details to this stuff, literally just as much as you want to get the effect that you're going for. But I do recommend having a good kind of system in place for knowing when to say, no more, this drawing is done, so that you can actually move on and create other chapters. Oh, that's super dark. Let's do, there we go. So I can even do stuff like this, right? Cool. In fact, that's kind of cool too, right? So it's not as perfect, kind of nice and chunky mountainside. And I can just fade this stuff away and do all kinds of cool stuff. So anyway, I find this to be an awful lot of fun. And if you take where we were with our flats, and then you look at some of these techniques that we have tried out, I think you'll find that you can come up with some really cool coloring styles pretty quickly. Hey, guess what? This eye is bothering me. Let me grab this eye. Make it a little bit darker. How does that look now? Kind of cool. Okay, I like it darker, except, yeah, it's got to have the color of the sky, like, ding, just there. Good, I like that. That's way cool. All right, cool. So I hope you like that. If that's useful to you, questions, comments, other stuff, put them down below. Otherwise, subscribe, check me out in the next video, and we will go into actually a pretty advanced but pretty rad technique for coloring, which is pretty different from this, but it's also something that you could build on top of. So we'll look at that in the next one. So I hope to see you there. Okay, bye.
Yamsketch.